All right. Hi, Olabinjo. Did I say that right?
Yes. Hi,
Okay.
how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Cool, cool, cool. So this is meant to be pretty much an informal sort of chat,
Yeah.
trying to get into your head a little bit, and that hopefully everybody who's watching this kind of gets to know you a little bit, what makes you tick, and your experience, your wealth of experience in the career space. But it's meant to be kind of like light-hearted. This is a safe space, even though it's going to go out to hundreds, potentially thousands of people. But it would be nice to have you as just real as possible.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
as opposed to the aspire to Maguire stuff that we see online
That's
every
not
day.
me, so
Right.
I don't think that's me.
Okay,
So
cool.
yeah.
All right, that's good. So I'm just gonna throw some questions, but I want it to be kind of conversational. So what do you remember your first salary?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell us how much that was?
My first salary, I think, was 10,000 naira.
Okay,
I was interning at an ad agency. I was in secondary school, interning somewhere, and like they didn't know how much to pay me. So they basically called my parents and they were like, "How much should we pay this boy?" And then they gave me 10K in cash. It was a really long
right.
time ago. They gave me my very first salary, 10K in cash. I
Okay,
remember it quite vividly. Yeah.
okay. And how from that to now, obviously, I can imagine that you're a billionaire. Um,
No, no, I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm not anywhere near billionaire status.
but even like going back to that first job, would you say that there was anything that you learned on that that has kind of formed how you are as a person right now? And
Yeah.
maybe anything that you learned or experienced there that's kind of just become, a backbone for your career right now?
Okay, so one thing I think that I learned that it was my very first time working in like marketing communications, and I was an intern that didn't know anything. So basically had to do a lot of learning. But one thing that I think that impacted me was like a really good eye for really good branding and design because they had a pretty awesome creative team. So that's one thing I picked up from there that has I would say has impacted me in my career. They had a very good eye for colors, for organization, um, of elements, for logos, and so that really I think is really something I've taken for the rest of my career, which is ensuring that we have really good stuff out there. Yeah.
Fantastic. So speaking of stuff that has helped you and kind of defined your perspective and stuff like that, what would you say your mantra is? Like, what's a thing
Yeah.
that continues to ring in your mind, especially when you're making like career decisions? What is like principle that's like, nah, I ain't bending on this. This is
Yeah.
this is
I
pretty
think
cool.
my principle is I don't know. One principle is I actually love technology, and I've like my entire life wanted to work in this sector. So I think one principle is that I've seen lots of things come and go, and so I have a really good grasp of like this doesn't make sense. Like it's either too complex or nobody wants to use this thing because it doesn't make sense. So I have a really good grasp of what makes sense and what doesn't, especially from a consumer perspective. And so I tend to shy away from things that are too difficult for me to understand. Because if I can't understand it, then like, why am I trying to sell it, right? Or things that are not particularly useful, mostly because I work on the marketing side of things, so I have to sell utility to some customer somewhere. So that's another thing. Another follow up to that is things that haven't ever made any money. Like there's technological ideas that have never made any money in the last 20 something years of proper mainstream internet, and I don't think they're going to make money now. I don't think anything has fundamentally changed. So I like to be very macroeconomic focused as well, which like this thing is not going to make money. Like I don't want to put years of work and hard work and focus and sacrifice into this thing that is not just going to end well for anyone involved. So those three things really guide me.
Yeah. Fantastic. So reading your story, one of the things that jumps out at me, and probably anybody who knows your background, is the 1 year career break, which is something that we don't necessarily hear of a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so can you take me, but when did that happen? What year was that?
The very first time it happened
Oh,
was in 2018.
okay.
In 2018, I left my job and I basically just wanted a fresh perspective on things. And so I took like, some type of gap year. But like, I had been through a gap year before before I went to uni. So I think for me, it was basically, I would say mostly came out of the blue. It wasn't like I sat down, thought about it and planned, but I started taking a break from work and I was interested in all of the other work that was coming my way. Um, and so I basically just took the year off to read, to learn, do a lot of research. Um, and I think for me, the reason I'm able to do that is that I can be quite detached from work. Like I love my job, I love what I do, I love the impact, I love seeing
Hmm.
people use tech and how it impacts industries. But I'm also quite detached from it. Like it's not my personality. So I find it much easier than most people to actually not work. Like I can just be and just do stuff in my day to day that is not like job or career inclined. Um, and so that's that. I would also say that another thing was I had kind of built up a cushion for myself. So you can't do this if you're not privileged, obviously. Built a cushion for myself. And so I'm because of that, I'm able to do these things. And thirdly is that I completely trust that God is in charge of my career. So when things are not going in a straight way as I want them to be or as I think they should be, I trust that God is going to come through some way or another. And I think my faith has really helped me be able to take these breaks because most people, I mean, I've worked with founders all of my career. I know very rich founders are unable to actually just take a year off. Um, and so the personality detachment does help me achieve that and be able to, take a step back and just sometimes give back, sometimes teach, sometimes write, sometimes just, relax and do absolutely nothing that has to do with, my career.
Okay. Let's kind of segue into, you talked about loving your job and
Yeah.
loving what you do and having a passion for that, but also being detached from it.
Yeah.
I want you to kind of speak to people who are, I'm talking about like young people or even maybe much older
Yeah.
people who are kind of not clear on what they actually want to do. So
Yeah.
maybe they have a passion for many things or they like many things, or they're just not, they don't have clarity in terms of career path or
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah.
What would you speak to that?
I think the first thing is that it's absolutely fine to not have clarity, right? Like I know I wanted to work in technology industry for a really long time, but for the first 20 something years of my life, I wanted to be a programmer and I was putting a lot of effort into learning programming. I was a good student. I was coming top in my class. I was doing projects on the side. Um, and then one day I decided I didn't want to do that anymore, right? And I wanted
Right.
to do the same thing. And so what has really driven me is my own curiosity because I am actually curious. So I discovered, digital and marketing because I applied somewhere and I was like, I'm going to be your social media manager. Do you get? And your social media management was called, it was an internship role. I basically
Right.
applied somewhere and I was like, we'll see where it goes. I saw a tweet. I sent the guy a message. And that was one of my very first full-time interesting roles actually in my career. And I worked there for a couple of years. So it's just like, I think exploring curiosity, I think there's sometimes we often want to have this 10-year, 20-year plan. And some people have that, and some people in certain industries have that, and they're able to actually toe the line because not much is changing, right, in 20, 30 years. But there's also people who don't have that clarity, and there's people who have to try multiple things and change their job. Maybe they used to be a lawyer, then they work in marketing, then they'll do some product thing. Then it turns out that the best thing for them is actually to do some type of beauty and skincare brand. Like just because they're exploring their curiosity, right? And they're trying to see what's next. So I think it's absolutely fine to not have a defined map. There's
Mhm.
loads of skills in any job that are transferable. Most
Right.
jobs actually have transferable skills to some other job, right? Depending on how you look at it and how you apply yourself. So my encouragement for most people is just to keep exploring their curiosities. Um, I would also say that there's also things that you might be curious about that doesn't necessarily have to be a job. There's also that.
Mm.
So, for example, I'm very curious about nature and about birds, and I like take pictures of birds and identify them, and I tick them off a really nice list. But like, I don't see any career path there. I think I'm going to go to school to get a PhD in ornithology or something. Do you know what
Right.
I'm saying? But
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
there's always like fun things that are just fun, right? I have friends that they sing very well, so they sing in church, for example, or they sing on their own, but they're not like musicians. Do you
Right.
get what I'm saying? So it's not
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
career. There's many
Mm-hmm.
opportunities to do many things. I think that life is really, really long. I've only worked for a couple of years, but like because I'm very cross and I'm very flexible, if I see opportunities that, like you mentioned earlier, match my values, that make sense, that I think I can deliver on the job or are exciting or are adventurous, I will take it even though it doesn't match like the thing I've done in the last 5 years, right? Or in the last 7 years. So that's one thing I think is important. Another thing I think is important for people is to know what they want, and what they want, not in terms of, oh, I want to be the best lawyer in Nigeria, or I want to be
Right.
the best doctor in Nigeria. But like, what are some things you like to see in a job? What type of people do you want to work with? What type of company do you want to work at? Do you like high pressure type of work? Do you not like high pressure type of work? Like maybe your best career effort is that you're going to be a teacher that transforms a local government in Lagos. Do you get what I'm saying? But like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're thinking like everybody else, which is, oh, I want this promotion thing, then maybe you're on the wrong path, right? So really being able to know what is important to you and optimizing um, for that, I think is what most people should focus on. And I have, an article about this on my blog, which is like, what career games are you playing? It's like having that clarity of values and reading, thinking about them as time changes will probably be a better guide than having one fixed, North Star goal. So
Mm-hmm.
that's been my experience, and that's my advice to most people.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
solid. That makes perfect sense. Um, as a founder, co-founder, I want to ask you a few questions. But before that,
Yeah.
when was the last time you applied to a job? Just throwing that out there.
It's been last time I applied to a job. It's probably been a couple of weeks. I do find
Okay.
myself applying more often. I find more recruiters reaching out to me, but I will sometimes see something that is so interesting that I cannot say no to. Um, and obviously, I'm in a completely different country from where I used to live last year, so I do find myself applying quite often. The experience is very interesting. I think many people should do it because you tend to see what's out there. Even when I wasn't looking for a role, I would apply. I like to see what's out there. I like to see what skills that companies are looking for, companies I don't know. I want to see
Mm,
what type of skill set, so I can also improve on my own craft. So I have been constantly applying. Even when I was at Future Africa, I would oftentimes just apply for a role just to see what it's worth. Even though I wasn't going to take it, I
okay.
want to see if I even qualify and if they'll
Right.
call me, right? But I also, because I want to see what gaps I might have in my own thinking. And sometimes you get really good feedback from a recruiting team that can, guide you in learning new things.
Okay. Cool. So as a co-founder of Future Africa, beg my pardon. Um, what obviously you'd been in positions where you were interviewing people, I'm assuming, right? Hiring
Yes.
people, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what questions do you get asked when you're on the candidate side, when you're applying for a job and in an interview process, that you think is actually stupid and therefore you don't ask that question?
Man, there's a lot of things I think are that just don't make sense. It's
Right.
like, okay, like for example, like people would ask somebody who's not working currently why they left their previous role and what happened there. I feel like it's a bit, I don't know why they asked the question. I don't think it impacts anything. Obviously, the person has a current job. You want to know why they're trying to look for a new role. But the person
Yeah.
doesn't have a job. It's just like the person, the person doesn't have a job. Hence why they're looking for one thing. I think that's something that is that I don't find thrilling to answer. Another question I think is being asked what your salary expectation is when the company hasn't published something. I do think that it creates a system of income inequality and it should be absolutely discouraged. Like if you publish a job post, put how much you're going to pay, even if it's a range, because companies have budgets, they have ideas. So I do find it funny when I'm being asked that question, right? And I'm like, you have it, but just tell me what it is, and I'll tell you if I like it or I don't like it.
Right. Yeah.
And I've had very funny experiences that way. Um, I'm trying to see if there's any other question. Think about any other questions that recruiters tend to ask you. Um, I do find that some recruiters will ask very specific questions. right? That they could have found out if they just read your CV, and it shows a lack of preparedness. Like, have you worked in this space before? Have you worked in that space before? Have you worked in this country before? It's like if you went through my CV,
CV, yeah.
you just scan through and follow the links because everything is linked, or you just Google the companies, you would have a better grasp of my experience. Like, why do we have to spend this 30, 45 minutes going back and forth? I do find it quite challenging, but I do understand that they also see multiple CVs, so maybe that's why, and they forget stuff.
Right. Yeah.
But in my experience, I just have the CV on the screen, and I just read through it literally on the call. So I think
Yeah.
there's also that. Really, I haven't really heard too many funny questions. Okay, I think some question that I have experienced again is due to lack of unpreparedness on the interviewer side of things is
Mm-hmm.
being surprised at a person's experience. Like I was like, oh, I worked here, and they're like, oh wow. I'm like, it's a red flag. It's funny. It just shows lack of attention to detail on some level.
Yeah.
Um, but also asking somebody questions that are outside of the job description,
Right.
right? Asking about something else that is not in the JD, because oftentimes when you put out a job description, the interviewee is coming prepared in some type of niche space. I want to tell a story about their work in that space. So when you start to go out of those things, it's like, yeah, this person didn't prepare for all these questions because that's not what you put
Well, you,
in the job
yeah,
description.
yeah.
Maybe if it came across like in work, it will be fine. But it's like, that's not what you said. That's
Said
not what you said you were
true.
looking for. So why are you
True.
asking me about this, right? But generally, I think many people ask very good question. Another question that can be annoying is like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, I don't
Right.
know. People don't know. The world changes every year. There was a recession a few weeks ago where I'm at. Now there's no recession. So I honestly, like, I don't know. And I've also sometimes tweeted the question back and asked the recruiter where they think I'll be in 5 years in this company,
Whoa.
which is also interesting because now you have to think of, you do realize how the future is, very malleable and not set in
Yeah.
stone, right? And you see how it's a difficult question to answer. I don't know what the point is.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think if you're hiring somebody in a role, you should be able to communicate to them and show them what the next few years would look like, as opposed to having them make it up or think about it.
Okay.
Those are just a few questions. I hope they're not too they're not too silly.
No, no, no. Now it makes sense. One of the silly questions I'm about to ask you now, obviously it's not a job interview, but like why Future Africa co-founder, why did you step away from that?
Yeah. So I mean, there was two reasons. The first is that by December 2020, by the end of 2021, right, we had built this company for just two-ish years, 2 years and 11 months, or 2 years and 10 months, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And one of the way we had the model that we had pioneered was becoming increasingly duplicated and commonplace in the sense that everybody was just doing the same thing we're doing. Literally same pricing. When we change our pricing, they'll change their pricing too.
Right.
So it really did make me and a lot of people in leadership feel that, yeah, we had um, succeeded in building a new idea, and having people, duplicate it and be able to, give money to founders was significant.
Mm.
Also, the company was starting to change its model from that model. It was trying to transition away. Um, and it didn't really just match what I wanted to do the next couple of years. So that was that. The first was the impact had been done, and
Mm-hmm.
I saw that impact. The second was it was transitioning to a new type of organization, and it wasn't aligning what I wanted to do in the future. And the third is that I wanted to do more global work. Right, I've done a lot of Africa focused, Nigeria focused work, and I wanted to do more global work. I wanted to see what I could, do in other places in the world and see what that looked like from a personal level. Yeah.
Fantastic. What are you doing now?
What am I doing now is I am writing and struggling to write. If I'm being honest, I'm writing a series of case studies of some very interesting companies,
Okay.
very unassuming companies that are actually quite larger than most people think that they are, and more impactful, and have large revenue numbers than most people that think that they are. And it's, it takes a lot of energy to be able to research. Thankfully, I have a group of volunteer researchers, but writing is
Mm.
actually where I have to put in a lot of work and effort. So that's what I'm doing mostly these days. What other thing am I doing? Interviewing and assessments quite a bit. Take a lot of time, but also speaking to organizations like you guys, teaching some classes when I have the chance, coaching a few people who are trying to transition into the field, and just helping them find their way around the challenges that are, because it's a pretty crazy time right now. Helping them find their way around the challenges. That's just
Yeah.
basically what I'm up to every day, and taking long walks, looking at birds, reading books, reading books and watching movies. Literally, I'm just like doing my best every day.
Okay,
That's a good
cool.
summary of it.
What's the last movie or series that you watched?
The last movie I saw was called I try to remember. It was an Indian movie, so I don't remember the name. It was Bollywood. Really
Okay.
good story. It was about this guy who basically pretended to forget his memory. He used to be like some kind of drug lord. And there was an accident, and then he just used that to create a whole new identity. And it was basically him fighting the drug lord people when they came for him because he deserted them. Um, but before then, I saw Dune, which is like the best movie this year. I don't think there's
Right.
any film that's going to top it. I saw Dune 2. It was really great. I'm a huge fan of the book series. So I think I'll put that over the other film I
Hello.
mentioned. So I would say Dune was the best film I saw recently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. What's one thing that you think is severely and criminally like underrated that you feel like people are sleeping on? And I don't want to box it, right? I don't want to
People are
say, oh,
sleeping on like career or like just life.
I okay. Let's do the two. Let's do career and let's do life.
I
So in
think like rest. I feel like people are sleeping on rest. I feel like there's so much capitalism, hustle and bustle, and let's do this and let's do this and let's go for this and let's go for this and let's do things as much as we can. But like
mm,
it's inefficient. So I think people are sleeping on the efficiency of just taking their time to get things done and having really core focus as opposed to running around and doing so many things. I think many people are sleeping on that, and the companies that really focus and really do just a couple of things right are obviously doing better than the ones that are trying to be everything to everyone. Um,
mm,
that's something I think people are really sleeping on. One of the things that people sleeping on um, is like what other thing? Black people's skincare and hair care. There's even in Nigeria, there's not enough products that are clearly for us. It's horrible. It's horrible. I go to the store and there's only two products. And I don't want to keep giving the same two people my money. I want to put my money around.
right.
Terrible, terrible, terrible. And there's products that like have existed for a while, but they're just bad for your hair. They're bad
Right.
for you know. One day I bought something. My baba told me and was like, "No, don't bring this thing again to my shop." It's terrible. Everybody knows, but like I think there's something that people sleep on. I think there's massive opportunity to like just we just need stuff to use. Like we use stuff every day. Most of the stuff out there is complete shambles. We just need stuff.
Yeah.
Like our hair matters, our skin matters. Like I think that is massively underrated. Um, industry.
Okay.
Yeah, just like globally, even yes.
Yeah. Speaking of globally, you're in the UK right now, and you've obviously transitioned from
Yeah,
doing, like you said, stuff in the local space in terms of like Nigeria, Africa. How has that been for you? And what sort of tips or advice would you give people who are looking to transition in that way as well?
people who are looking to like move globally or do global talent, which of them?
Do yeah, global talent move out of Nigeria, for example, and just like
Yeah,
fit into that career space outside.
I think that on some level, the one thing, and this is not like to say what anybody has done is not important. I think the one thing you really realize when you start to do global work is how much work you've done in Nigeria, but like low impact. And I'm not saying like it's not impactful on a national scale, but it's not impactful on a global scale. Like the numbers are poor. Nobody's impressed by
Right.
any of them. And so you really have to, you know, be cognizant of that. I think that's one thing. The second thing is that you find that there's loads of opportunity, and that's where like the whole, career planning, thinking about your career thing can really come into play. Because there was a week I was just like looking at jobs, right? And I was just looking and scrolling through different websites, and I looked like 100 product marketing jobs. And there's no way, there's not been any time in
Mm,
the sector in Nigeria where there's been 100 product marketing jobs open within a week. I've never seen that before, never experienced it. I don't know if it's going to happen soon, maybe.
right.
But like there's so much opportunity and there's so many things that exist in so many industries. So it can be a bit overwhelming for many people when it's time to actually decide what type of work they want to do.
Mm.
And for me, I think you should just try, right? It does take a lot of what's the word? You need a lot of grit because you're going to have to apply to more jobs than you've ever
It's,
possibly applied to. And just have to like play that number game. And the gritty part is being able to overcome the rejection because you do get a bunch of rejection emails. I get a bunch of rejection emails every week. So you do get a bunch of rejection emails. So you have to be quite gritty, to be honest, to be like, okay, this is just an email, right? They didn't reject me, they rejected my application and being
right.
able to move on to the
I
next
like
thing.
that.
I think that's the second thing. So many people find it overwhelming just the sheer number of like opportunities available in any space at all, any industry at all. Um, and then the third thing is preparing for global talent, I think requires you to be quite exceptional in many different ways. And so I think for many, and this is not like I don't know how to use the right words here, so I don't like people don't feel offended. But like
Right.
for many people who work, for most people who just work, and even for me myself, we just do our work, right?
Mm.
The good thing in my own career is I've had several opportunities to be able to give back to the community because I basically grew up in a space where it was very community focused. People would teach people things, they would hold hackathons, they would hold events. So I've had the opportunity in my career to be able to do stuff. Also because of like how I am, I tend to write, I tend to share my opinion, right? I tend to
Mm.
get a Twitter space or something to talk about what I've written. And so I've always done that. But I think global talent really is looking for two things. One is obviously the things that you're doing in your company or in your work, but supporting that work is also how have you impacted your community. And it can be community as in Nigerian tech. It can also be community as in tech ecosystem globally. So what type of things have you done outside of your job? They really like to see, you know, have you written something? Do you mentor people? Have you been a coach for a program? Those things become really important. Um, and following on from there, I think something that I struggled with in my own application is I tend to not keep materials from work when I leave a job. So I leave a
Mm.
job and I have literally nothing. I don't have screenshots of anything. I
Mm.
wipe my computer clean because I don't want any problem. I don't want any legal problems, right?
Right.
Um, and when I was applying, I realized that I needed a lot of evidence of my work. So I had to actually go talk to, former colleagues who were still working at those places to help me out, or even
Mm.
just colleagues who had even left and be like, "Do you remember when we talked about this? Do you still have? Do you have a screenshot? Do you have the charts? Can you send it to me?" And those things, I think, for me, the lesson was to document work. I typically document my own numbers. I just write
Okay.
things. Um, but writing things down is not important to technician. Technician wants to see the dashboard. You know what I'm saying? They want to see the dashboard, or if somebody
Yeah.
writes a letter attesting to those numbers, then that's fine. But so being able to keep your own score sheet would really help. Um,
Mm.
so for example, maybe you're working in marketing in a startup, right? And when you join, the website changed. You want to take a screenshot of the previous website and the new website to show the kind of work that you do and how
Right.
impactful it is, right? That's just one example. Maybe you do a YouTube series, right? You want to have a screenshot of that YouTube series. That's proof of the kind of campaigns that you can build, right? So those things are really important. And I will say also doing very important quality work in the particular space. For me, it's been technology platforms for all of my career. But there's many people who are working in spaces where it's not tech, but they don't know.
Right.
They then don't qualify. Like if you go through the technician visa guide, there's lots of examples there of things that don't really qualify, right? So you have to be cognizant of that. If that's what you're planning to do in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, cognizant of working on or with companies or products that are actually digital focused, that have digital platforms where the customer interacts with the platform in some digital form. It can be a POS, which is digital. It can be
Yeah.
a computer. It can be on their phone. It can be some type of machine, right? But keeping that in mind, I think it really helps a lot of people when they're planning, to apply for this type of programs.
Okay. And speaking off the back of that, how important would you say sort of like personal branding and social media is in terms of positioning yourself as
Yeah.
exceptional, global talent, that sort of thing?
I think that on the like personal branding is like a red flag because I'll give you one example, right? In my first application, I got rejected, and one of the comments the reviewer said was that, oh, they think that all of the things I had submitted as those evidences were to build my own personal brand. So the
Oh,
person
wow.
was even impressed by, oh, you have followers, you have LinkedIn, they don't care, they really don't care. And I had to reply back and say, no, I have always done, this is something I've always done. I wasn't doing it for followership. Like I've worked in this industry for a long time. People call me to speak at events because of my work,
Right.
right? I write because I've been writing a blog since I was 15 years old, which is why I write about marketing. Do you get like it is me?
Yeah.
I'm not doing it for like I don't particularly have a massively outsized readership on my blog. It's a couple thousand people, right? And that's like me. Um, so it's important because on one level, it's important because there's some measurements of peer recognition depending on what you choose to submit as evidences, which is how do your peers in your country see you? Have you won any national awards? That's
Right.
one of the things that's on the website. So if you choose to do the peer recognition type of thing, you might have to put in more work to meet people, to know people. People don't really know of your work.
Mm-hmm.
But like I didn't go that route. I basically just showed community impact and evidences. And because I've worked in a lot of multiple spaces, and because I'm quite opinionated, people actually want to hear what I have to say. So, so it's not a matter of like, oh, what are the 3 P's of product marketing? It's
Right.
like I actually have something unique to say. So people invite me to stuff to speak, right? So and people hear me, and then people invite me to another one, another one, another one. Um, Also because I like to also give back. Sometimes I will reach out to people and say, "Oh, I learned your company is doing something. Like, let me know if you need any help. Right? This
Mm.
is not looking for a job or anything. Just let me know if you want to get on a call and share ideas, and I can give you some feedback." And that's really it. So it's more of like if the competition for Tech Nation as an endorsement is high. I think many people don't know it's quite high. So like you started writing something on LinkedIn like 6 months ago, right? And
Yeah.
maybe somehow it gets viral, 10,000 people see it. There's somebody else who's submitting a 200,000 people newsletter and be like, look, I wrote a newsletter and he has 200,000 subscriptions. Do you get what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
not mostly based on, oh, I post often, I post every week. It's mostly based on what's the impact of this thing. Like,
Impact.
I have to
Right.
send screenshots of my blog's analytics and be like, this number of people read my blog. When I published the book, I had to attach screenshots of the seller back end and be like, this number of people bought my book and these are the reviews. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
it was far more important than I wrote a book. Okay, yes, but like many people write books and nobody reads it. So, so, so you get what I'm saying? So they tend to mostly focus on the numbers, right? And numbers tend to be far more important. What other thing do I do? Even in like speaking engagements,
Yeah.
technician can often give you feedback and be like, yeah, you spoke at this event and it was nice, but like only 10 people came.
Right. Right.
It's not impactful on remember that this is what it's a global talent visa, right? So they are looking at it in the scale of the world. It's like, okay, 10 people showed up, it's nice. But your colleagues, 1,000 people showed up for their own
Right.
event, right?
Right.
Um, and I think many people can get around that by just being more collaborative. Um,
Mm.
Sharing ideas with people, like letting your friends know you're doing stuff. Let them come. Let them invite people that might be interested as well, because people know people and people like to share resources, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
that those are things that can really help if you're trying to do that. Um, so I would say the personal branding thing is nice, but don't like over-index on it too much if it's not
Right.
having impact, right? It might
Impact.
be much better for you to join an NGO that teaches digital skills and teach 5,000 students in a year than writing a blog. Do you get what I'm saying?
Mm.
That has way more weight on your application, right? Than doing something that doesn't really have a lot of impact.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Just got a few more questions and I'll let you go. If I
No worries.
wanted to get a job with you, for example, now, if you were hiring,
Yeah.
what would be, should we say the
Yeah.
top 5 most important things that you'd want to find out that I'm able to do or qualities that I possess?
Okay, I think one quality that I really like is curiosity, and I can sometimes be able to gauge. I have questions that I ask. I won't say the question on the call. There are
Why
questions
not?
that I like to ask people, like, okay, like, and this is a question that I have been asked as well in interview, which is like, what's something you learned recently that was surprising to you? And it's not like it worked. I just want to know how curious you are. I think the curious people really are able to expand beyond, not beyond the job description, but they're really able to spend time understanding what we are doing as a company, as a business, as an organization, and then be able to give us ideas that match, our goals and how we are structured. Right. I think that is something that I see lacking very often. And I saw lacking when I last time I hired a bunch of people. So
Right.
curiosity is one. I think the second thing, I really like working with people that have like, I really like giving people autonomy when I work. Um, and autonomy in the sense that somebody being able to deliver something at the time that they said they will, and not waiting for me, right? But autonomy also in the sense that I can trust somebody to, and I can be like, oh, you're hosting this podcast. Like literally, one of my associates before I left Future Africa, I'm like, yeah, you're going to host this podcast, so prepare to host. I was the host for about 2 years. You're
Right.
going to host this podcast, prepare to host this podcast, and she did really well. And so being able
Uh,
to see that autonomy, um, I think really helps. What other thing is, because I tend to hire for a lot of marketing roles, I'm able to see what people have done previously. So I don't necessarily ask them any question like, oh, you worked at XYZ company. I can go to their Twitter page, I can subscribe to their newsletter, I can read their blog, and I can see whether what you're doing is quality or not doing. And there was a time I was hiring and I had two associates. One person had very specific our industry background. The other person was coming from like industry adjacent, not really specific background. But when I went on the industry specific guys, their social media page, because he was still working there at the time he applied, there were so many grammatical errors and punctuation errors. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to hire this guy because I'm not going to start teaching somebody in their
right.
20s, grammar and punctuation, right? And it was so common and it was so bad. And so being able to do that, I think, is important. Then one other thing I think is important is people being able to vouch for you,
Right.
because many people would ask you for references sometimes, but they can also just go on LinkedIn and find a colleague you're connected to and message the colleague. That's happened to me before. I had no idea. Somebody called my friend. Somebody called my friend and told my next employer that I wrote some hot takes on my blog about the crypto space and sent them the link. And I had no
Whoa.
idea. And they saw it and they liked it, thankfully.
Right.
But I had no
Thankfully,
idea what
yeah.
was going to happen, right? Because they had similar opinions and had built, so even saw some of the problems that I highlighted. But like I had no idea that was going to happen. So like that's something that I think happens in work, especially in very small organizations and startups. People often have the time and resources to actually go ask what working with you is like. So I mean, if they find that you have similar values to them, it works. If they find that you don't have similar values to them, I guess you're not really a good fit. But that's
Right.
something that I think I do often is just, talk to somebody's previous manager, talk to their former colleague, like how are they at work? How did they solve problems? What are some um weaknesses they have? How can we help them overcome it? Because I don't like throw people away because they have some weakness. Like how can we help them overcome the weaknesses? So yeah, that's just like three things. What other fourth thing? I've learned that people like to look for whether or not the person really cares about the job. I don't
Right.
know how to show that because sometimes I'm not meeting people for the first time, so I don't over-index on that. But I've been in interview panels where we're trying to really see, if the person actually cares about the industry or if they just think it's some next hot thing and they just want to be part of it. But if the person actually cares about the industry, there's questions that folks often ask, like, something that just happened in the news this week would be one perfect example. Just so that you're
Right.
following and you're keeping up to date with what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, these are just a few
Okay.
things.
Great. What are you most proud of in your career journey so far?
I feel like this is another question that recruiters ask me that I don't like. Because now I have to pick one thing. What am I most proud
Oh, you can.
of?
I mean, you can give us a few,
Um,
but like something that
I'm,
stands
I'm,
out to you.
something that stands out to me. I think that the work we did at Future Africa was super important. Most
Mm-hmm.
part of it because in a few years we deployed a lot of money to founders who actually needed money. I think it was about $10 million. But also we had launched this product type of thing in the pandemic, right, where there was no money even for us, and being able to see the team really work together and push through all of the challenges that we had, and then getting to that impact, I think was really, it was a really good feeling at the
Mm,
time. But also seeing people learn from our model and be able to duplicate it is also really nice, because you don't just want to like innovate, right? If it's just you that is innovated, okay, it's good for you. You know
yeah.
what I'm saying? You want to see other people do similar things, and that was, very very fulfilling. So
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely one of the most fulfilling parts of my career.
Okay. Any regrets?
Any regrets?
Yeah,
Yes,
or something.
I have two career regrets.
Oh, really?
When I was in university, there were two companies who reached out to me. One was a colleague I was working with, and he was joining some new company. I won't say the name, but
Okay.
he was like, I'm joining one new company. Oh. We need marketing somebody. I know that you are busy, but if you have some chance, would you like to have a chat? And I was like, I'm so busy right now. I didn't even want to hear the idea. I didn't want to hear anything. And so I recommended somebody else. And they
Mm,
eventually hired the guy down the line. And then there was another company that wanted me to also work for them. But like at the time, I was just like, I'm not going to lie, I wasn't interested in the sector.
right.
Literally. I was like, I'm not interested in this sector. People should leave me alone. Right. And so I declined both companies, and both companies got acquired years down the line. So that's just one funny regret, which is like, if I could have even taken the two jobs at the same time. Maybe I'd
Wow.
have made some back. Maybe I'll be a billionaire. Maybe I'd have retired. I don't know. Maybe I'd have left the company. I have no idea. But like,
Yeah.
so for me, it's just like that thing I said earlier about curiosity, right? If I was curious to just be like, okay, let me
Try.
hear you guys out. Let's
Yeah.
see what's there. Maybe
Mm.
that'd be a different story. But I think I reneged on my curiosity a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just two last questions.
No worry.
Is there a career advice that you didn't take and you're happy you didn't take it? So basically, especially for like young
That's
people,
a
that
good one.
people like advice or you come across, motivation and stuff, right? But has
Yeah.
there been stuff that you've gone against and you're glad that you actually didn't take the advice because it paid off not taking
That's
the advice?
that's actually interesting. So a little bit early in my career, I wanted to leave a company that I was working at because I wasn't happy there, and I wanted to
Mm,
really leave. Um, and part of the reason I wanted to leave was because my compensation growth was really slow compared to how much I was making for the company. I was making a lot of money, but I felt like I wasn't valued. Um, and then I spoke to a senior colleague about it, and the senior colleague advised me to basically stay and see what was going to happen. But I was really convinced. This actually happened twice. I was very convinced that I wasn't like, I didn't feel appreciated. I was convinced to leave.
right.
And then I left, and about a couple of months after I left, the entire company just like collapsed, basically. Yeah,
Whoa.
and like everybody there had to leave. And so that's one thing I don't regret. I don't regret. It wasn't like a aspire to aspire type of
Type.
advice. It was
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
realistic, right? Maybe
Hmm.
I should have had some income for a few months, as opposed to just jumping ship. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's advice I didn't take, and it turned out well. I don't know if there's any other thing that comes to mind now, but that's one, example that I can remember really well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last question, and I'm sure you're expecting this, but speaking of advice, what advice would you give people? Let's talk about like life
Yeah.
and then career
You
specifically.
know that portable meme that is like 99 advisors and one helper.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
me
yeah.
right now. That's me. I'm the 99 advisors. I think for me, one thing is I have really learned is to be able to think long term in one's career. I think too many people think short term, and then they lack integrity, and they lack
Mm,
honesty. So they start out doing really really well in like the first 3 5 years, but everybody then realize that you can't actually trust this person to deliver, and so that
mm,
impacts their career in the long run. So for me, I think that's like one of the most important things, which is like, do what you say you do what you say you promise people. Don't overinflate expectations or overinflate what's it called, numbers, so that you can look good. If the numbers are bad, present the
just,
spreadsheet. I was having a conversation with somebody sometime last year, and we're talking about like how our expectations of us in, marketing teams can be very high. And I'm like, look, me, I'm going to present the spreadsheet the way it is.
Yeah.
If we tried our best and it didn't bring money, let us know that it didn't bring money so we can move on
We can
and do
move.
something,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that is very important. I think another thing that is happening is I think there's a lot of pressure on a lot of people these days to be able to do something by the age of 30, right? Like I'm not on Forbes list and I haven't died. And let me tell you a secret. There's now a Forbes list 60 under 60. Did you know? Did you know that there's a Forbes list 60 under 60? And I bet they're going to keep increasing the number to
Number.
like
Yeah.
90 years old.
Right.
Because there are 60-year-old people, 70-year-old people who are doing amazing stuff. And it's unfair to them to not recognize them, right? It's not always young people in their 20s that do stuff, right? There's
Yeah.
way more successful entrepreneurs in their 30s, 40s, 60s than they are in their 20s. So I think being able to be cognizant of that and not put too much pressure. I think there's a lot of pressure that obviously comes from the kind of society that we live in that can be put on young people to want to do something very big. If you're naturally ambitious, I think that by the time you're in your 20s, you would have done a couple of important stuff. And
Mm.
important can be to you, to your community, to the country, to your family. You would have naturally just found yourself attracted to those things and done them, right? It's important to not fall into the trap that, success is one way. I have to be a founder. I have to be a CEO. I have to be.
Mm.
There's tons and tons of successful employees in, I don't know, in Microsoft, in Procter and Gamble. And we don't even know their names, but I
Yeah.
bet they go home every day and they're making bank. Do you get what I'm saying? So there's not
Yeah.
just one way to do things. There's many different ways. So I think I encourage people to not fall into the stereotype of, oh, I have to be this by the time I'm 30. I have to have done this. I have to have gone to this school. I have to have participated in all of these programs. I think there's always like opportunity always comes to do things. So one should mostly index on the opportunities than just have this like fixed scarcity mindset of opportunities are limited. They're really not. They always come and they always go.
Right.
But
Mm.
that's just the way the world is, right?
Cool.
Yeah. I feel like you
Thank
have
you.
another but
Well, I mean, we could talk forever, but obviously, like that's not gonna happen. So I'm gonna I'm gonna reel it in. But anything that you want to plug, like
anything I want to plug.
yeah, that you want to put
Mm.
people on to stuff that you're doing, stuff that you're interested in, that you think people should
Yeah.
get involved
I
in.
wrote a very interesting book in 2022. It's basically about like how to grow fintech companies in
Okay.
Nigeria. And the reason I wrote it was because I realized there was so much about other industries in other countries. There's books, there's articles, there's all kinds of
Mm.
things you can read up. But there was really nothing for people who work in Nigeria that they could learn from, or people who were thinking about building a company in the Nigerian space. And so I wrote the Growth Handbook, Scaling Fintech in Nigeria. And what it really is it takes experiences from many different people across many different types of financial services industry in financial services companies, really, and it takes
Hmm.
all of their experience, specific experiences, specific skills that they have, and takes their lessons into notes, right? So, for example, what do you want to do if you get hired in an early stage startup, right? What are
Right.
some things to take note of before you join? What are some things you should know when you join? What are some things that hiring managers are often looking for in the first 90 days, right? When they hire people. And that's very
Hmm.
practical advice. And then if you join a very big company, how do you ensure that you're making sure that you're doing everything compliantly by CBN rules or SEC rules at scale? Because now you're losing some control of your public perception, right?
Yeah.
How do you control for that from a marketing communications perspective, right? If you're doing billboards all across the country, how do you measure success of billboards, radio ads, TV ads? And we talk about these very practical things. We talk about things like pivots, right? There's certain companies that have done really well because they've changed their trajectory, changed literally the entire product line. Why did they do that? How do they measure for success? How do they keep expanding, as they grow nationally or internationally or whatever?
Hmm.
So that book is really important. And if you just Google the Growth Handbook, Scaling Fintech in Nigeria, or just Scaling Fintech in Nigeria, you'll find it, and you can
Okay.
make a purchase. I don't know, maybe I should give you guys like a special discount code.
They will
Maybe,
love that. We will
yeah.
love that.
Okay, I'll send that. I'll send that to share after
Okay.
the to the call. Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Olabinjo. One last one, very, very last one, I
Yeah.
promise.
Yeah.
And I know it's never a straightforward answer, but there's obviously the increasing Jaguar thing and people talking about in terms of career trajectory for those in Nigeria specifically.
Yeah.
In your opinion, is it a straightforward answer, as in to Jaguar or not to Jaguar? Yes, no. Or is it kind of dependent on a few things, and what would those things be?
It depends on a lot of things, or not even a few things, a lot of things. I think it's a very complicated decision to make, right?
Right.
Like, if all of my advice so far have been like, it depends, right? It really depends on your person, what you're looking for, the countries you're looking to move to, the
Mm,
behavior of people in those countries, economic mobility in some of those countries, because it differs from country to country, right? The kind of jobs available to you, the kind of jobs you think you're good at doing, right? And for people who want to go to school as well, the degree, how
yeah.
valuable is the degree? Do they have to even do a degree to move? What are some other opportunities available to them? So I think one really has to think about it and honestly really just pray that God guides you, because I've heard some crazy stories, right? I think that's one thing, because there's so many. I feel like there's never been this many opportunities for people from outside of the world to be able to move globally, right?
Mm,
Literally North America, Europe, Australia. There's so many opportunities. People who move to Asian countries, and so one needs to be very cognizant of all of the things that they're going to have to prepare for, right? Because each
yeah.
society is a different society. Each society
Different.
has different values. There's good
Absolutely.
things, there's bad things, there's things you might not like, there's things that you don't agree with at all, and you could
Mm,
get in trouble for saying you don't agree with them. You know what I mean? So one
yeah.
has to be cognizant of all of those things when making the plunge. But I think that for people who can afford to even just attempt to apply or whatever, it's worth taking the time out to do some of those things. I think there's a lot of valuable lessons you could learn from, for example, maybe you want to apply to the top, I don't know, 20, 30 MBA programs in the world, right? It means you have to prepare essays, you have to learn how to interview. You might not get in, but that's also valuable experience, right? And it
Yeah.
could,
True.
transform your career. You could maybe even help other people get in. But I think those things are, they can be very important and very valuable to the individual. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Olabinjo. It's been a pleasure
You're
talking to you.
welcome.
Thank you for taking out the time as well.
Thank you so much.
Um, and yeah. All right.
Have a lovely day.